Okay, well, good morning and howdy. Welcome to our November 2019 Graduate Education Advisory Committee meeting. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the members and also the coordinating board staff. I guess I will perhaps, start with just maybe naming our reappointed members and our new members, and then we will go around and do introductions. And so reappointed in July 2019, Richard Berry from Stephen F. Austin, myself from Texas A&M, and Andrea Galato from Texas State University. And then a hearty welcome to 5 new members, Juan Gonzalez from the University of Texas at Dallas, Anil Kumar from Prairie View A&M, I guess he's not here, but Ambika, oh, he is? Oh, no, okay, sorry, yes. And then Ambika Mathur from the University of Texas at San Antonio, Timothy Robbie from the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, and then Chris Winkler from Concordia University, Texas. Okay, so welcome to you all. Welcome to our new members. And, I guess as we normally do, we start, then we'll do actual visual introductions. We'll do first the ones that are present here and then whomever is on the phone. So perhaps we can go to the right.
Andrea Galato, Texas State University.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Nalos, and I'm a program director here at the coordinating board.
Dean Nykerk, University of Texas at Austin.
Raj Kumar Lakshman, Texas Tech at El Paso.
Rick Berry, Stephen F. Austin State University.
Kathy Matthew, University of Houston, Clear Lake.
Joseph Opon, University of North Texas.
Andrew Zinn, UT Southwestern Medical Center.
William Harn, Lamar University.
Peel, University of North Texas Health Science Center.
Sarah Lynn McKenna-Crowley, UT Austin, Graduate Student Representative.
Sarah Larson, University of Houston.
Mark Sheridan, Texas Tech.
Tim Robbie, UT Health San Antonio.
James Goman with the coordinating board.
Okay, thank you. And on the phone?
Lucia Dura, University of Texas at El Paso.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Just a quick review then of some meeting procedures. So if you are joining us on the phone, if you wouldn't mind muting your phone unless you're talking. For those of you who have mics in front of you, if you want to press the button so that the red light comes on when you are speaking, and even though we might be able to hear you in the room, it also allows those who are joining us on the phone to hear us. I think most people did this, but if you haven't, there's an envelope for you to put your lunch money if you ordered lunch. Procedural sort of about our agenda items, and so there will be some agenda items that will require approval, and so then we will take a motion and second and then vote on them. And the discussion items will not require an action, and so we won't vote on those. Also, Jennifer will be sending, and so if you wouldn't mind elaborating, Jennifer, the surveys.
Okay. So generally, following the GEAC meetings, we'll send out any additional information or materials that were discussed or requested. On top of that, I ask for additional information from you all, which is part of our annual reporting, which are travel expenses, so we get an estimate on cost and time committed to participating in this committee. We'll see some of how that comes to fruition every year in a later agenda item, but I'll send an electronic link to everybody following the meeting. Thank you.
James, is there anything you want to share? Nope. Okay. Okay, so moving on then to item number 3, then our summary notes from our June 2019 meeting. So those of you who were present, hopefully you've had an opportunity to look over the summary notes. And if there are any additions or corrections, we can take those now. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for approval. Okay, so we had a motion, and it's been seconded. So all those in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, so we will then move on to our next item, which is an update on the GEAC presentation to the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success, September 19th. And so I made a brief presentation on behalf of the committee to the cause committee, and I think there is actually in your agenda packet sort of the handout that was distributed, and then I kind of spoke for a few minutes providing a few highlights from the meeting. And so I talked about the fact that we had discussed 4 main topics, which was we focused, we spent some time working on the strategic plan for graduate education. And then during discussions throughout the year, we talked some about the trends in master's and online graduate programs, student support and value of graduate education, and then 60 by 30 Texas marketable skills goals. And so then I kind of gave a few points about each of those areas, and in relation to the strategic plan, I sort of conveyed the fact that we participated in the development of drafts, and then we provided feedback up until then the final draft, I guess, that was submitted for comments. And I mentioned that we looked forward to the final version so that we could work to implement that. The second topic, really, I gave them a few of the points that we discussed in relation to master's and online graduate programs, including micro-credential characteristics and considerations. And particularly, I talked about the things that the universities consider when they are looking at starting new programs. And, one of the major drivers being workforce needs, but then also career opportunities and earning potential for the students. And then I guess the next topic related to best practices for tracking graduates. And I mentioned that was becoming a growing focus for the institutions, and I guess that kind of connects to the marketable skills also. And a little bit about the conversation that we had and when establishing stipend levels and competitive funding packages. And I talked about how, we all look at, our peers and our resources, that we have available in determining that support, and that we also are all also thinking about how do we support the students in engaging in other professional development experiences, such as presenting at conferences and things like that. And lastly, I mentioned that I guess at our last meeting of the year, we had a presentation by 3 institutions on their efforts to implement the new marketable skills requirement, and the dialogue that we had following that in terms of sort of some of the pros and cons those institutions experienced in developing their marketable skills. And that was sort of, I guess, my overview. And really I think there was really just a little bit of discussion. Dr. Paredes just provided some feedback about encouraging institutions to really think about the increasing cost of education. And I assured him that we all were really working very hard to find ways to continue to make, graduate education affordable, and then also find ways to secure external resources where possible, And then that lastly, that our efforts in relation to the marketable skills, providing the opportunity for us to try to help the students really understand how they might be able then to utilize their degree in now really a growing variety of different ways. And so I think that's all I can really remember that were highlights. I don't know if Jennifer or James, if there was anything else.
No, I think you captured most of what I remember. Jen, do you have anything else?
Those were sort of the big items. In our post-meeting email, I'll include the link and where in the video that is, if you wanted to watch it back and see the different questions and discussion from the committee members and our former Commissioner Paredes. Also in the materials, you'll see a summary of the activities of the year, and that's also where we have the annual costs, the time commitments, and this allows for each advisory committee, or majority of the advisory committees present at some point to the various board committees here, and would have a similar reporting structure of, here are the highlights and the overview, here are the challenges that the committees are addressing and providing input on, and how can these advisory committees help inform the coordinating board, and then also provide information sort of both ways. And this really looks at, what are the members participating on, engaging on, and what does that mean for the scope of the state. So it's always helpful to have a summary back to the board committees as they're making decisions about things big picture, to have your input, so it's much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So before I go into then the other items on the agenda, I thought I would share with the new members maybe, sort of how we build the agenda. So we are typically discussing, at the end of meetings, topics that the members feel are worthy of, discussing across the different institutions, to then provide input to the staff members perhaps on, how we are addressing things, or maybe things that we are grappling with. And then when we determine those, for some of the topics, the staff will provide data through presentations. And I guess recently, over this past year, we started also asking for volunteers from institutions to maybe present, just to seed the conversation for the discussions with all institutions providing input. There was someone who joined us. So that's sort of how we built it in. We kind of have a set of topics that are primed for this year, but we will, after every meeting, also take input if there's some additional items that the people on the committee believe are worthy of discussing amongst the group. Okay, so I guess our first then topic is agenda item number 5, which is talking about campus climate. And then I think there's a particular point out that we wanted to share in relation to sexual harassment in the context of the campus climate. And so in your packet is the summary of the report from the National Academy. And so I don't know if, Andrew, if you wanted to share some things about that report in particular.
Well, I think, you have the findings from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine that actually shows how prevalent the sexual harassment is particularly in the sciences, but in graduate education in general, and then in particular in science and engineering. And since everybody is always trying to recruit more females into the STEM fields, it's just not apparently enough to recruit them in. There seem to be, the environment isn't really conducive for them staying. And I personally found the report and the summary and the overall report quite alarming regarding the experiences that students have. apparently, I mean, from the report, one of the main features is harassment, like verbal harassment. On our campus, there was recently also a similar situation where a faculty member, just with their comments, basically diminished the role of the female and female in his lab. And so obviously there are, most universities have equity and inclusion offices. There probably are reporting structures on your campuses as well. We were just wondering what kind of special efforts you as graduate deans or graduate schools or those in charge of larger centers, what you are doing in your office to kind of raise awareness, to provide training, how you collaborate, if you do, and what kind of structures are in place to empower females in the sciences to kind of combat this disturbing trend. So it's really a sharing, if you do anything, if you don't do anything, if you think something ought to be done from graduate colleges, those types of things. I mean, you know, on our campus, we discuss it in graduate advisor training, and we've had a discussion about this report at our graduate council meeting, but that's pretty much the extent of what we have done. But I don't know, I was kind of curious to hear what others are doing to provide a climate change to make things happen.
I can speak to Stephen F. Austin State University. To my knowledge, our graduate school does not take on any activities aimed at dealing with this. We have a pretty rigorous training process campus-wide, and that everybody undergoes probably more often than they wish they had to. But it is a necessity, and
authentication is not working.
Can you mute your phone if you're on?
No, and it was weird. When it first started, I had the text push. And that worked for a while, and it quit. So then, and that was like months ago. And then I asked it to start calling me, and that worked for a while. And now it quit, and now it won't let me in at all. And I haven't changed devices.
Okay, Kenneth.
What's that?
Kenneth, can you hear us?
Yeah, hold on.
Can you mute your phone, please?
What, the number? It's 936-581-6362.
Turned off and
What do you mean for do?
speakers to hear us.
Okay, so we'll maybe try to continue.
I'll just talk louder then. I'm a voice professor. I should be able to do this. But what we do have on our campus that works in our favor in dealing with some of these issues is that the dean of our College of Science and Mathematics is a woman who has really brought to the forefront the whole issue of women in STEM in many, many ways. There's a whole initiative she's put forward and keeps on the front burner and in everybody's line of sight that supports women in STEM by recruitment, by providing scholarship funds, and by making issues of harassment sort of a centerpiece of what she's trying to do to boost the position of women in the sciences and mathematics.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing that we have is it's a group called Women in Medicine and Science. It's called WIMS, and they're completely having the authority to bring in people from outside, and we have guest speakers talking about sexual harassment. When I was reading this National Academy's report, one of the things is the symbolic compliance is something that we had addressed because, you know, everyone takes the Title IX training part of it, but is it really being enforced and everything? So when we have these speakers come in and say what they have dealt with and how they have handled it, it really helped us understand a lot of different things.
How do I re-enroll? Or should I reinstall the app? Or what?
And we have a series of regular workshops that we have to talk about issues of campus climate, talk about issues of diversity and inclusion, And they have been very popular. We actually had to double the number of those workshops because they are the most well attended of all of our workshops. Very interested group of graduate students and faculty that have been attending those workshops. So they've been very successful.
What kind of things do you cover in those workshops?
Okay. And just enter that information. Go on.
Issues about campus climate, about inclusion of females and underrepresented students, and how we interact with those students, how we encourage them, how we make sure that they're not left out or felt that they're left out. So we vary the topics in response to the survey that we do after each one of those workshops, and sort of ask for topics that people would like to cover.
Are those workshops required or mandatory?
We will not be able to fit them in our schedule. They are very, very popular, but it's not a bad idea to make this
But they're well attended.
Oh, they are very well attended, yeah.
Yeah, at UT Southwestern, we also have a Women in Science and Medicine Advisory Committee, and we have a Associate Dean for Women's Careers in the Office of Faculty Development and Diversity.
At UNT, some time ago, there was an issue in one department, and I required all the students and the faculty to go through 39 training. I sat through the training with them. It was a little bit difficult with a couple of faculty members perceived to be the perpetrators. Full professors did not participate, and there was not much I could do on that. Things have changed significantly because once the students became aware of their rights and empowered, things changed considerably. So the students are stepping forward to report. Next steps with this report, I'm going to try to get it to all the we have a grad advisors meeting once a month, so I'll present this report to the grad advisors and also send it to the grad council so they will plan how are we going to deal with this on our campus.
So I'm just curious, how many of us have conducted climate surveys on our campuses?
We're about to start one at the University of Texas, El Paso. And we're going to start specifically working with the the Graduate Student Association at their request, because we believe that, of course, the issues we're seeing are the faculty who are, I guess, propagating the issues are not necessarily the most attuned to them. So we're going to start with the students and see if creating awareness through that helps get to the faculty.
At the University of Houston, we have had an advanced grant and a lot of success with promoting women, both through the women and underrepresented minority hires, through the hiring process, working with search committees, and also in promoting women into leadership roles. I think there has been less of a focus on graduate students. I'm in the process of a climate survey of graduate students right now, collecting data and hoping that we can use that information from the climate survey to then design some initiatives addressing these issues and other issues that might come up. So through the climate survey, we hope to be able to disaggregate the data by gender, by department, and program.
Is that climate survey validated? Is it, is it something that's available, or?
We, I looked at some surveys that were out there. I worked with a psychology professor to develop the survey based on some validated surveys that are out there. So it's the first time that we've done a survey for graduate students, so we hope to build on it in the future. But we addressed issues related to the mentor relationship with the advisor, and also getting at incidences of sexual harassment and bullying and things like that, food insecurity, financial information as well. So kind of a broad-based survey, but we did take from the literature, take validated questions from the literature.
So we did our first graduate climate survey in 2012, and we sort of developed in-house. We get some questions from our advanced program, and then others kind of in looking at the literature. And we, I guess in 2016, we did our second one, and I would say that, high-level findings, there were, satisfaction and I guess satisfaction with advisors, satisfaction with the university, there were some gender disparities, and then also historically underrepresented groups not feeling, as satisfied with the different levels of experiences. We are about to, then this spring, do our third one, and we decided to try the grad suru, which is, I guess, I don't know now which institution is sort of the home for it, but there are multiple universities that utilize it, and so we decided we wanted to try that one so that we could have sort of the ability to be able then to compare our results to other institutions, because part of what we were asked, after the first one and the second one, was sort of, well, what's your goal? When, what level of satisfaction is okay? And so I think being able to compare, we thought would be useful. So we are in the spring going to run the survey. I will say that it is extremely challenging to get students to respond. And so then when you get into groups that are underrepresented, trying to have enough numbers to really, say that the results are generalizable or whatever is sometimes challenging. So that's what we're also going to try to work on, is trying to really improve that. But, usually those surveys need to be a little long to get at the different areas you want to. And sometimes the questions, are triggers possibly based on what might have happened to them. So they're a little delicate. But we've tried to, with each of those, once we get the results, we try to disseminate to a lot of different groups on campus, and then we also try to collect data on perhaps things that units have done in response to those findings to help us try to convince, the students that, there is a real benefit to replying because we're going to use the results.
So Karen, having the many surveys is a good point. So what did you do in response to the first survey, and did any of those things make a difference when you looked at the results of the second survey?
Yeah, so I would say that this was probably 2013 we finished the analysis, and really the area that had sort of the most negative response related to well-being. And so we really then worked at trying to, with things that we could do from our own unit, with our counseling and professional services office, really work to try to get people to sort of see that students were really maybe, struggling on different levels with, feeling maybe, kind of not balanced, or sometimes feeling a little low, just all of those different kinds of things. And so we then did some different things. In our 2016 one, the numbers not quite as low, but the thing is that were they the same students? So that's, I think, what we're challenged with is, longitudinally, how do you really say, that you have improved things if the students are different and stuff like that. But we did, that was our highest one. And then I think there was something about safety. Some students not necessarily feeling safe in, like in the evenings in the weekends when people are sort of having partaken a little beverage, and sometimes feeling a little freer to communicate things. And so sometimes our students, international students, maybe felt not quite so safe walking around the campus. So.
What percent of them participated in these surveys, actually?
So I would say 15 to 20%. Yeah. So, but we did, and we struggled with this, but we decided to do everybody. You know, there are some where you try to target, but both times we've just said we wanted to provide the opportunity for people to voice, and so we didn't focus on groups or anything like that. So the numbers were thousands because, you know, we have 15,000, but still, it's a small percentage, right?
Yeah, that I would imagine then that represents quite a challenge for the smaller institutions. You representing one of our largest institutions in the state, if you're only getting a 10 or 15% response rate, that means then that an institution that maybe only has 1,000 or 2,000 graduate students is going to have a much harder time getting a representative sample. Did you or anyone else try offering some sort of little incentive, a free lunch or something like that?
Lunch won't do it.
Free food.
Yeah, so I think it depends on how many surveys students get in general. So we did a survey in 2013 with current students and with alumni, and they had never really been surveyed. So we actually had over 30% response rate, which is, you know, kind of normal for survey research. And yes, there were incentives. So the free lunch or the free pizza, I mean, that's nice, but that's I mean, we offered Kindles, e-readers, all sorts of things as I mean, drawing, not for everybody, but you know, for those who wanted, they could, yeah, and we then live whatever tweeted and whatnot the drawing so that it was all above board. So, but yes, it really depends on how many surveys and emails individuals get.
Yeah, for this upcoming spring, we've decided, well, we think we have a campus agreement, and so we are actually doing also the staff and the faculty climate survey, and we are working with like colleges and whatever, and I think that there's maybe like going to be 10 auxiliary questions, and so that they would include their questions in this, and they've agreed not to do their own survey, so we will see. You know, what the problem also is we send the requests a lot of times to email. We try to social media or whatever. So you're trying to find also a way to get them to know that you're asking them to provide the input. That's also hard, right? Because there's so many channels of information now. So it is really hard, I think, now. So.
How lengthy is the survey? Is it like 4
Oh.
or 5 pages?
Yeah, it's probably, I would say it could take 10 minutes, you know, possibly 15. That's long, right? Because they really, like, I know for me, a minute is just too long. So, but the thing is that you have this moment and you want to capture, you know, all these maybe, you know, different areas of questions. But yeah, maybe, 10 minutes, I think. So one thing I guess I was curious if anybody's been thinking about, one of the recommendations in the report speaks to the fact of, for the programs where, you know, the students are funded from external dollars. And it talks about, you know, sort of the challenge there where, so the advisor is also the funder of the student. And there's a suggestion, so this is number 5, about diffusing the hierarchical and dependent relationship between the trainees and the faculty. And it was curious if anyone, you know, we've had some little conversation about it. I know that there are 1 or 2 universities I've heard of nationally that are starting to try to think about, you know, perhaps really the committee having a much larger role in the whole process versus, I think a lot of times, because I'm a STEM person, the advisor is really the person, and the committee kind of just comes in every once in a while when there are these milestones about the, you know, preliminary exam or this or that. So I don't know if any of you have started trying to have any conversations about, you know, ways to sort of help there, because I think that definitely is an issue when the person's funding them and they have, therefore, outputs from the funds that the faculty has, and then the students desire to finish their degree and probably only do what, you know, they feel is important to, you know, get the training that they came to get.
Dealing with the UNT, I'm dealing with a case like right now where the student came to us and said that they are not making progress because the advisor is not paying attention to them, and it's same gender. So I brought the department chair in, and what the department chair was recommending, and it looks like they have not done it as well as they could, was to work with the committee rather than depend on the PI, because that had been the situation, and PI was not paying attention to the student. And so, at least in that department, the plan is to work with that department to make sure that it is the standard, is the norm, that it's not just depending on your PI alone, but also bring the committee into the discussion. The student was complaining that they submitted a paper to the PI, it's more than 10 months, and they have not received any feedback, and they're stuck, they don't know when they're going to graduate. And so the chair's response was, make sure that you bring the committee in. And so I think that's going to be a broad strategy that, at least for that department, I'm going to try to use.
So any other input from the institutions? I know James was also going to talk to us about sort of the Texas.
Yeah, so this is a timely discussion because incidents of what we'll generally call sexual misconduct, which includes sexual harassment, sexual violence, dating violence, stalking, any of those type behaviors. This general subject of sexual misconduct was an important subject at the last legislative session. And out of that, we had two major bills come, Senate Bill 212 and House Bill 1735 were both passed and signed by the governor. Both of them contain some similar provisions regarding sexual misconduct, which I'm going to go over here in a little bit. They were not exactly the same bill. They have slightly differing provisions, but they're mostly the same. They required the agency to call together a negotiated rulemaking group to develop a recommended set of rules based on the content of those two bills. So we did that in September and October. We held 3 negotiated rulemaking meetings. We had a committee of 24 representatives of both public and private institutions. The provisions of these bills apply to all higher ed institutions in the state, 2-year, 4-year, undergraduate, graduate, doesn't matter. It's all uniform in regards to how it applies to public and private institutions of higher education. That group developed a set of recommended rules, and basically there had been a bill previously and a set of rules from the last session. So we had to go in and repeal the old set of rules, which are now superseded by this much more comprehensive set of rules that we've developed now. Just to kind of keep going in terms of a timeline, in October we received the final recommendation of the committee. So in October we routed that internally and prepared it for publication. It went forward to the Texas Register in 2 sets. The first set was published on November 1st. The second set was published in the Texas Register on November 8th. We'll have public 30-day comment periods that are still in effect right now. You can go and take a look at the rules online at the Texas Register if you want to, and make a comment to us here at the agency, to my division, Academic Quality and Workforce. The rule comment periods will expire on December 1st and December 8th. And the plan is then very quickly to turn around, look at any comments, bring those back to the committee, ask them very quickly, do you want to make any changes or not? And then have that final set of rules after comments that will bring to a special called board meeting on December 11th. So December 11th is going to be a very busy day. In addition to the usual cause meeting that we would have, we're also going to have a special called meeting to consider both these rules, and there is 2 other sets of negotiated rules. One of those rules isn't really so much applicable to us because it's in regards to Senate Bill 25, and it's about requiring undergraduates to file degree plans. So that's not going to be of concern so much to this committee, although I'm sure it's of concern to your institutions. However, the second set of rules, that could be applicable to graduate education. The second set of rules were focused around transcript notation. In particular, transcript notations will now be required when students are eligible ineligible to re-enroll in your institution due to a non-academic or non-financial reason, which if you read between the lines, that basically means conduct. Yeah. So that now has to be put up on transcripts. We developed a set of rules, and those are also available. I think the public comment period is going to be closing soon. Yes, the public comment period for those just expired. Yeah. And those will also be considered at the special called meeting, just as a general FYI. I wanted to talk a little bit about, just to kind of give you a general sense of what's in these rules, because these rules require you, the institution of higher education, to develop a pretty comprehensive policy around reporting upward in the right way in terms of your structure, reporting out publicly, and so forth. So the first sections give some definitions to terms. The committee worked very hard to try to align these definitions, which you would find in the national federal laws, particularly the Jean Cleary Act, which, as I understand, is the federal law that governs a lot of this stuff. So the definitions should all line up carefully. The committee was pretty careful about that. The first major section, 3.4, requires your institutions to develop these policies on, and again, the legislation uses this particular set of terms: sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking, which I'm just going to summarize by the blanket term sexual misconduct, so I don't have to repeat that long phrase over and over again. So your institution needs to have a policy. The policy must include definitions of prohibited behavior, sanctions for violations, protocols for reporting of and responding to these sorts of incidents, interim measures that would then protect the victims, and require the institution have a policy statement regarding basically the rights of the victim to report the crime to law enforcement, to receive a prompt and equitable resolution, the kind of things that you would expect to see there. You would be required to include the policy in your student handbook and in online publications. You'll be required to include this material in your orientations, both for entering freshmen or for transfer students. You have to develop a comprehensive prevention and outreach program. You have to review your policy at least once every biennium and revise the policy as necessary, and obtain approval from your governing board on it. Then the bill goes into a lot of details about reporting. It talks specifically about the reporting of incidents, and it talks about who there should receive these types of reports. This is both your regular Title IX coordinators and people in your Title IX office, but it also allows you to designate whoever you want and to give them training so that you can just designate people in your graduate school or in particular departments or in the registrar's office, wherever you want, and you can run some people through training, and then they can be sort of designated confidential recipients of disclosures. So this allows you to have sort of a wide, comprehensive reach throughout your institution, that lots of options for students to go to and talk to when they need. It talks about the confidentiality that you need to provide to people who report, both victims themselves or perhaps witnesses. So confidentiality is an important section of this, and there's a lot. I'm just going to give you a high picture view and not go into the weeds here. Talks about when people don't have to report, talks about reporting in good faith but being mistaken, and that gives you some protections. The next section goes into administrative reporting requirements. So you've got these people reporting to you on your campus, hopefully to these correct people that are meant to receive these disclosures, and all of this then has to filter up through your Title IX office. They collect basically some data and some statistics on reports on an annual basis, and this then gets reported upwards. So let's see here, not just every year, every quarter. Not less than once every 3 months, the Title IX coordinator shall submit to the institution's chief executive officer a written report, including what's been reported, investigations, disposition, these sorts of things. Then, in turn, at least once annually, during either the fall or spring semester, your chief executive officer shall submit to the institution's governing body and post on the institution's internet website a report concerning the reports received. Basically, here you're publicly reporting out and summarizing, here are the types of incidents we've had on campus, here are the reports we received. Okay? There's also provisions in here for electronic reporting. There are provisions in here for victim protections. There's specifics about what needs to be included in the disciplinary process. Okay? There's some requirements for memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement and advocacy groups and hospitals and other medical providers. There's provisions for student advocates. There's a lengthy section on confidentiality. There's a section to protect reporters, so that's protection against retaliation. There's a requirement that you certify compliance to the coordinating board. And then finally, there's a section on applicability. So most of this stuff is going to take effect either January 1st, that's when the major part of the rules go into effect. There are some provisions affecting your institution particularly that don't take effect until August 1st of next year, 2020. So most of these rules, again, take effect either January 1st or August 1st of 2020. And just to go over quickly again, these sexual misconduct rules are now posted in the Texas Register November 1st and November 8th. So the comment period, again, will run through December 1st and December 8th.
We'll include links to where you can find that in our, I think.
Yeah, I'm not expecting you to remember all this. I'm just kind of giving you the general sense of what's going on, and we'll follow up with particular links so that you don't have to have just furiously written all the notes down.
We'll get you in the post-meeting email of where to access that information, and if you want to register a comment as well. I had a question regarding your summary. Was there discussion or items put into these rules about processes for due process for the accused or alleged perpetrator? Because traditional policies on campuses usually use preponderance of evidence and not beyond reasonable doubt. And so, I don't know, was that addressed as well in these rules?
There are some aspects of that in both the discipline process, and it talks about the review process. However, a great deal of the nuts and bolts of this, I believe, is left up to the institutions to decide. And also, I think from what I understand from the discussion of the negotiated rulemaking committee, some of the particulars are already spelled out in federal law through the Jean Cleary Act. So, yeah, but there are a great many specifics in this bill. This bill's notable in some regards for how detailed it is about a lot of the aspects of this process.
James, I recall a conversation with our Title IX coordinator about this, that these things were coming down the road. And one of the things that she mentioned was there was like compulsory termination if you failed to report. So did that get incorporated into the rules?
Yes, there are consequences for various stakeholders down the line, and one of those consequences is that if you are an employee of an institution of higher education and someone comes to you and gives you one of these important disclosures and you don't do anything about it, yeah, the consequences are probably going to be pretty bad.
So I'm just curious, you were saying effective January 1st, and it sounds like there's a lot of procedural things that institutions have to put into place. So is there sort of a time frame when you have to have everything, or are you saying January 1st?
What I'm saying is that the rules, so the legislation required that these rules be in place by January 1st, 2020. So that's what we're reacting to. However, the rules don't require then that you instantly have all these policies and procedures in place. What they require is that you begin the process of establishing those processes and procedures, the policies and procedures that you're going to have on your campus. And that's why I say a good bit of this doesn't actually take effect until August of 2020. And I think that's one of the deadlines for some of the things that you have to do and have in place. We'd honestly have to dig dig into the details, again, of this pretty close, which is probably more than we want to do during this. But, yeah, just to reassure you, you don't have to have all this figured out and in place, beginning of the year. That's just not reasonable. Let's see. There is also, just kind of as a follow-up, there is a smaller group, sort of a subset of this negotiated rulemaking committee, again, representatives from your institutions, that is developing that recommended training for Title IX coordinators and other people that you want to designate on your campus as people who can receive disclosures on these topics. And that recommended training and what it should be coming along here within about a month. So that should be available to you by January 1st so that you can use it as you start developing your policies and your procedures.
So one of the things, I guess, following up on what you were saying, I wanted to sort of share an experience, that kind of enlightened us a little in something that we're kind of working on is, so of course, we have investigation processes that, existed for, some other, kinds of things in relation to maybe civil rights violations or something like that. And so we had a scenario of a graduate student who was, I guess, a PhD student, and there was a complaint, and the complaint had to be investigated. And we had processes in place if somebody was, so this person had instruction responsibilities. So, it was quite clear, what do you do? Okay, so now this person's not teaching. They actually weren't allowed to come to the campus, so they weren't teaching, and somebody, took over their course. Well, an area that we hadn't really thought about were the graduate students who work with this person. So in the beginning, there was really just no attention therefore paid to that, and those students were just there. And as you know, in an investigation, you really can't disclose things. And so all the students knew was this person couldn't come to campus. And so then there's a lot of information that's circulating and even finger pointing in terms of perhaps people trying to determine who might have been someone who did something, right? Because there's a lot of speculation, but you can't really provide information. And really, for about a year and a half throughout the investigation, it was really actually a very stressful situation for those students in that person's lab. And honestly, a few of those students are really still living through the after effects. And so it brought to, our attention that we really need to then think about what's the processes, what should you do for those students? And it was just something that really, I guess, we didn't maybe have the right people at the table when they were thinking about developing the processes when you are then investigating, a professor, because they hadn't thought about that other group of students. So I just thought I'd maybe share that with you because it's something we still haven't finalized I guess a common standardized process that we will go through, but it is something that we're working on.
And I'd also mention that it also applies not only to the PI, but also members of the supervising committee. We've had that issue as well, where we've had to remove a committee member for similar reasons.
The issue is also there when it's student to student. Then it becomes, so we've had situations where a student was then not allowed to be back on campus until the other student had graduated. But those are issues then as well, when the person returns, how to deal with the other students, and they want to know, why was this person gone for so long? Why are they now allowed to be back? So there are a lot of other issues to manage, and if you're faced with that, if you haven't prepared, it can be difficult.
I would be curious if anybody has any actual information. We expanded the list of mandatory reporters many years ago. And when we did that expansion, one of the common comments from faculty was that they would no longer be able to talk to students. Anecdotally, basically they're saying this is going to interfere with our ability to actually advise students. They can't confide in us anymore. Ultimately, for instance, in our College of Engineering, our dean decided every faculty member would be a mandatory reporter before the institution ever took any positions on this. And their opinion was that that's just tough in some sense. But I have no idea whether there's any actual data to support that anecdotal position. At the time, I was already a mandatory reporter as an associate dean, and so I was already used to the fact that when a student came to me to talk to me, one of the first things I had to tell them is, if there are certain things you want to tell me, I will report it. If you don't want to report it, don't mention it. So it's basically a disclaimer that I have to give up front. And it can be somewhat chilling, but the alternatives can be certainly much worse. But I don't know whether anybody else has any experience or any other anecdotes as to whether it's actually a problem, whether that was just a ridiculous reaction as you expand mandatory reporting. Which I believe that the new law, I think, for our campus, I'm not really sure it expanded the mandatory reporters because almost everybody already was.
Right.
But I think the law has some specificity about who are mandatory reporters now.
Yeah, so the rules here and the law spell out that, of course, the Title IX coordinator, assistant Title IX coordinator, the people in the Title IX office, as you would expect, okay? But then it also allows you to designate other employees, and it also allows you to train students as sort of peer recipients of reporting. There's student advocates in here that can work with students as well. So I would say that, yeah, if you have a situation where just about every faculty member is a potential person that can be reported to, that's in some ways what this set of rules anticipates, is that really any employee on your campus could be reported to. Now, that's not necessarily that's intended or that's who you want, but if anyone does receive a report, it's going to be their obligation to carry it forward, whether they've received this specialized training or not, is kind of the baseline way that you want to regard this. Everyone needs to be ready for these sorts of disclosures and just know what they need to do in case they receive them. This law also has mandated electronic reporting, including anonymous reporting. So I think that's part of what that's intended to address, Dean, is that sometimes people want to report, but they don't want to report face-to-face. And so there are provisions in here that require you to have an electronic and anonymous reporting option so that students or whoever wants to report something and they don't want to necessarily have their name and face tied to it, that's possible for them.
So I'm not aware of any data that's really studied that part, but I will say that, so in some new system regulations that I guess were enacted this year, faculty were mandatory reporters, and actually our graduate student TAs were defined as faculty for this particular situation. And so we are, having to work through that. And I think there was definitely a lot of concern with the graduate students about, sort of having that responsibility, because they kind of go back and forth between being a student and then maybe being an employee, for that time or whatever. So I don't know if there is any. I haven't seen any data that says having a lot of people who are mandatory reporters helps or not. I think one of the things I hear is peers holding people accountable is sort of one of the biggest challenges, because a lot of times people may know that there are bad actors, and as peers, say, for example, faculty, they are not trying to push back and try to hold their peer accountable for the behavior that they know maybe they are conveying, and that's one big problem.
So I was wondering if the bill is notable in its specificity. Are there detailed procedures for who will be informed of the results of the investigation? I think that goes to some of the comments that we heard earlier.
Yes, I believe that is the case. So I know the reporting has to go upward, right? It has to go to the Title IX coordinator, then it also has to go to the chief executive officer. Let's see. So certainly the Title IX coordinator reports up to chief executive officer in terms of sort of the funnel of the incidents. We're not talking so much the particulars of each incident, right? But an awareness of what sort of incidents are occurring and some basic information about this, right?
Is it actual investigations or all reports? Because there is not all reports result in investigations.
Yes, so what gets reported upward from the Title IX to the Chief Executive Officer are, let's see, on the reports received for the institution reporting period, including investigation of those reports, the disposition, if any, of the disciplinary processes arising from the reports, and the reports for which the institution determined not to initiate a disciplinary process, if any. So that kind of gives you a complete picture. You know, here are the reports received, here are the ones that we took action, here's the action we took, and here's the set of reports for which we decided to take no action.
I think that's the question that you have, because I know this is a debate on our campus, especially with our students, and oftentimes even with people who report. The outcome of the initial inquiry, the investigation, are never made known back. And so sometimes action is taken, but people don't know that.
Yeah.
And I know the Title IX coordinators talk about that quite a bit. And so there's a lot of debate about the relative merits of reporting back the results and not reporting back results. But I think that's where you're going with that.
So under disciplinary process, and this may also speak to what as I say, it is a little bit of a complex set of rules, and pieces of your particular question are in different sections. So when you're conducting the disciplinary process, there's some requirements for what that disciplinary process has to include, which I think was an earlier question from Jen as well. They must, let's see, the institution that initiates a disciplinary process concerning an allegation shall, 1, provide to the student and the alleged victim a prompt and equitable opportunity to present witnesses and other evidence relevant to the alleged violation during the disciplinary process. Ensure that both the student and the alleged victim have reasonable and equitable access to all evidence relevant to the alleged violation, including any statements made, information stored, social media posts, or physical evidence. 3, take reasonable steps to protect the student and alleged victim from retaliation and harassment. Let's see here. I'm looking to see what we have about the closing the loop then and following back. Yeah, I think that's still open-ended, honestly, because there are confidentiality provisions in here as well that may affect the ability to report back. So it is detailed in some regards, but then certainly in other regards, you know, it's left up to the institution to decide some of the particulars.
So is this bill about students only, or is it also about postdocs, staff, lecturers, faculty? So if the victim is not the student, but one of the other categories?
Yes, this covers both alleged offenses by or reporting by students or employees. So the student or the employee could be in either category, either the alleged victim or the perpetrator or the reporter. Just out of curiosity, how many of you already, if you're aware, how many of you believe you already have an electronic reporting option on your campus? Just about everyone. Great, great, okay.
I think at UTEP we have something.
Well, thank you, Lucia.
Okay, any other discussion on the topic? Okay, so let's see, it's 11:06, so should we go to agenda item number 7?
Sure.
Maybe a little early for lunch?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so well, before I go to that, I thought I heard someone else join us by phone. Do we have anyone else on the phone? Okay, I guess not. Maybe they go on. Okay. All right, so number 7, a presentation of policies for international students enrolling in online programs. And so we will, I guess, start with a presentation from Andrea and then open it up for discussion and sharing.
Well, my presentation is really brief. I was just thinking there are more and more programs that are pushing online degree programs, online components of degrees, and we're also all recruiting international students or have large international student groups on campus. And as you are probably aware, there is a Homeland Security rule that international students must be enrolled in a minimum of 9 credit hours per long semester, and that no more than 3 credit hours of those 9 can be a truly online course that does not require physical attendance for classes, examination, or other purposes integral to the completion of the class. So if the class is truly entirely online and they do not have to be on campus for any component, any vital component of the class, then the student can only have, of their 9 credit hours, only 1 such course. So that obviously presents a problem if you have a truly online degree program that is entirely online from start to finish. Because then a student who is an international student who is presently in the United States on an F1 or J1 visa cannot participate in it. They can, however, participate from their home country, provided there are educational agreements. Sometimes a U.S. institution has to actually be authorized to offer the degree in the particular country, et cetera. I was just wondering what kinds of discussions you've had with graduate programs who are considering entirely online degree programs, how you handle the advertising and the recruiting. Do you not allow international students to apply in the first place? Do you have specific questions for such students in these programs? How is this handled? So on our campus, there are a couple of programs that entirely are online, and we have a disclaimer on our website under what circumstances a student can participate, and we refer them to the international office to determine what the best course of action might be. But I was wondering how that is navigated on the individual campuses.
I think probably the one on our campus that has promised the largest growth, I think their presumption is that if it's an international student, they will never be in the U.S. I don't think they've worried about this, but I think that's based on a presumption that they'll never set foot here. We have debated the opposite question is, people in that program, they're students, they're graduate students, they get our degree, and no one knows it was online. Do they ever need to get a student ID? What if they want to come to campus? Can they? So we've had those discussions, and I don't think we've figured them out yet. The ID question right now is one I know we've had some issues over because our campus security says that anybody who comes on campus has to have an ID. But these people don't want to necessarily have to travel to Austin, and there's no way for them to get an ID unless they show up in person. So we haven't figured that one out yet, I think, would be the right way to say it.
Do those online students pay the same fees that the resident students pay?
So the particular program I was thinking of is in our own internal nomenclature, what we call option 3. So it's a different fee structure. It's not state supported. So that particular program. I don't think we have any programs that are entirely online that would be, again, to use that awful terminology, what we call option 1, state supported.
We just recently had a program that stopped offering enough face-to-face courses. There was a time where international students would need to be at a particular campus location in order to to meet the enrollment face-to-face requirements. They came to us about 6 months ago and said, look, these courses really aren't making, we're going to stop teaching them. And so we had to stop admitting international students to that program. And I see a couple more coming in that way as well. We don't have a very large international enrollment. This doesn't help that either, but it's sort of it's where we are.
So we have several online programs, and particularly, I guess, some engineering ones that have large numbers of international. I think the ones that are fully online, the thought is the individual doesn't have to come to the U.S., and so they cannot, get then the, the F1 visa for those programs. I do know that there is in the proposals for those, there is the thought about, like export control. And so there's someone who has a responsibility to review to see if there are any issues there. And I guess it's possible that there would be maybe students from some countries who might not be allowed to enroll in the program. So, there is this part where they try to figure out where you are located when you're taking the class, which is, I think, quite challenging. So some of that is probably self-disclosure. And then for our face-to-face programs, there is this where our International Student Services is sort of trying to help the students be aware of the fact that they shouldn't enroll in courses. We do sometimes have to be sensitive to, sometimes we have courses that have two possibilities. You could do the face-to-face or you could do the online one, so we need to make sure that we have face-to-face slots then for those international students. So I think there's some different things that we have to be aware of with the programs to try to make sure that they stay in compliance, and also that they know what they need to do to stay in compliance. I think there's another tricky part about international students in the sense that they don't all have to be out of the country. And so you could have international students who are in the U.S., and then that gets into the whole, you can't discriminate when people are on our soil. So there's sometimes some things we have to consider there.
If the whole program is online and if there is an international student in a different country, right? So they are also going to be paying similar tuition or higher tuition than an in-state student or something like that. And what kind of student services do these people get? And if they're paying the fees, are they getting all of these services? Is there anything like a commencement or something for them? Or is it just you sign in online, you get your degree and you walk away? How does it happen?
Well, I know that, in SAC's accreditation, it talks about distant students, be it people in the U.S. or wherever. There's a certain part of it that they're supposed to be getting the same education. But I don't know for every campus, but I know, like, as an example, though, the health center fee and the rec fee, those would be fees that you are present in a site and you would pay those and have access to. But the library fee, then those students would pay that because they have the ability to access those. So I think, at least for us, there's a set of, I don't know which ones exactly, then list them all, but we have some that, I guess, distant students would also still pay.
At UNT, the off-campus students don't pay 7 fees: property deposit, medical service fee, student union fee, recreation facility fee, transportation fee, environmental services fee, and athletics fee. Those are fees they don't have to pay. They are waived for them.
In terms of, on our campus, all workshops and services that we provide, with a couple of exceptions, are open to online students as well. So we live stream all of our workshops, or we do webinars, or we have recordings of past workshops. So those services, like professional development that the Graduate College offers, is available to any online student, regardless of where they are in the world.
I was going to say, that's the challenge, is not the rec fee or the health center fee, but it's the access to all the other things. So your writing center, for example, or those professional career development things. So that's a challenge, is making sure that those are available, because again, that's an accreditation requirement. We're compelled to make sure that the resident students and the distant students have access to the same services.
Any further discussions or inputs that people might want to share there? No? Okay. All right, so I don't know, should we do one more, or do we go? I think I see lunch over there if y'all want to do an early lunch. We have to do a motion, take a motion and approve going, taking a lunch break. So what's the pleasure of the group? You want to try one more? One more, yeah. Okay, so we'll do 8. Okay, so this is a discussion of semester credit hours in the program inventory. And
Okay, I'm going to lead you folks quickly here through the current iteration of the program inventory. And I think this is the one that we want right here. So I'm just going to, I'll pick on Angelo State. They're the first one up that defaults, so.
James, can you zoom in on it? It's really small.
Yeah, you bet. Go and well, it's going to take it a second to pull up. So you've probably noticed we've had a few problems with our program inventory lately. This related to the big web conversion that we did. We had a new content management system for our website, and unfortunately that threw our program inventory and a few other tools that have web-related displays to them. It threw them into disarray, but I think we have most of the problems fixed now. Okay, why is this not displaying? Okay. Sorry, I don't know why it's being so reluctant here. Why? Okay. Okay, why don't we break for lunch so I can try to resolve this technical problem, because this is not working. Yeah, this is just locked up. Yeah, let me see if I can fix this.
James, if I may just, and I don't want to stand between us and lunch, but I've got a question, if you don't mind. And you're well aware, I think, of where I'm going. For whatever reason, not often, but we occasionally have discrepancies between what our practice is and what we discover on the program inventory.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's a bookkeeping issue, and sometimes it's just historical changes that never really got documented properly. And so the question arose recently where we had a case where something was on the inventory. We thought we sent the documentation through, but it wasn't on the inventory as a change. And so I guess the question is this: if there's X number of credits on the inventory, is it okay to have X minus a certain number, or because it's approved up to that number of credits, right?
Okay, yeah, I think I understand the question you're asking. Is there an over and under on this?
Exactly,
or
right.
How does that work? Okay, so really what we want to display, what we try to consistently display on the program inventory, is the minimum number of hours that it would take a student to theoretically earn the degree. So in a lot of cases for bachelor's degrees, that's 120 hours. Could the student have a minor that leads them to have 125? Absolutely. Could the student have a double major, and now their degree plan requires them to have 130 hours? Yes. So that's one thing that we've tried to make clear in the program inventory, which is part of why I wanted to show you this display, is that we've now put a sort of little disclaimer on there for the public and for other stakeholders to let them know that what we're displaying is the theoretical minimum, but that particular student degree plans could easily and often do require more hours than that. I believe this recently was brought to our attention by at least one, maybe a couple of Texas institutions, because they were running into problems with the Department of Education in terms of certifying student hours. And, you know, students, I think the situation was something like, you know, students got 135 hours earned toward the degree plan, and the DOE just thought that was way too many because the degree plan on our inventory only requires 125. And what we're trying to make clear is, yes, that's the theoretical minimum, but lots of students have degree plans that require more than just the minimum, particularly at the undergraduate level, but at the graduate level too. And so that's what we're trying to address. So the system is set up so that we can display the year the program was founded, so you can see how long the program's been around. You can see the number of credit hours required, but that's set at the minimum. And you can see, you know, of course, the title and degree designation. So you can see whether it's an EDD or a PhD, or whether it's a BA, an MA, an MFA, or whatever it is. I think the main time that this becomes tricky, and it's maybe not as transparent as it could be, is in the case of PhD programs. And this is something we go back and forth with institutions on, and even go back and forth amongst ourselves. Are we going to display the hours required if you enter with a master's, or are we going to display the hours required if you enter with a bachelor's? Well, some programs don't even allow entry with a bachelor's. But then some programs expect you to come in from the bachelor's, and maybe even rare cases don't even have a master's. You see what I mean? It's hard to get this rather antiquated system to accommodate the complexity, particularly of doctoral programs. It works pretty well for associates and bachelors and masters, but it's a little clunky, to be honest, for doctorates. And you know, we've investigated a number of times, talking to our IT staff, how could we set this up differently? And consistently, the answer I keep getting back is, you can't get, you know, GT 2020 performance out of a 1950 car. This is an antiquated application that should have been retired 15 years ago, and no, we can't make a bunch of changes to it, because if we do, it'll just collapse and not work anymore. It's just not set up for that. So, here we go. Yes, thank you. So I'm going to walk over here where I can see a little better. There we go. So yes, we'll pick on one of our co-chairs here, and we'll pull up Texas A&M. Okay, so yeah, if we just go across here to the top, the Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Science, it shows that 120 credit hour minimum, and it shows the start date in 1989. If you look at the second line there, you see that we have two different versions of this agricultural systems management program, one that requires 36 hours and one that requires 32 hours. And both of them have a start date of 1994.
Can you zoom in on those?
Yeah. Question, where's the little zoom bar?
Yeah, hover on the bottom right. There you go.
Bottom right?
The plus sign on the bottom.
Yeah, thank you. Is that better? There we go. And now if we scroll down to the bottom, here you can see the little disclaimer there. We've got it. The program inventory displays the minimum number of semester credit hours a student could complete to earn a particular degree. And here, most especially, it does not reflect an actual student degree plan, which could have tracks or options that require additional hours beyond the minimum. So we're hoping this will help address, because apparently, not only do you folks at the institutions use this, and sometimes members of the public, students and parents, well, it turns out, who knew? It turns out sometimes federal regulatory agencies like the DOE also come in here and compare maybe what you've been telling them versus what we have on the program inventory. And so they too, as Mark said and a few other people have commented, they're concerned when there are discrepancies and things don't line up. Not too long ago, we sent out to all the institutions an update request, and we said, hey, please just look at what we've got for all of your degrees. Compare that to what you have in your own records management system, and if things don't line up, please let us know and we'll make corrections. Part of the reason we did that is we have a big SIP change coming up, right? The DOE has now issued SIP 2020, and so not right now, but fall of 2020, those new SIP codes are going to become active. We're going to be sending you out a memo pretty soon saying, hey, here's the SIP changes coming up, and you're going to have to make some decisions because sometimes SIP codes go away. And then now we've got to decide, okay, so 1.0307 is gone. And that definition doesn't apply more. So whatever programs you had in that particular thing, now we've got to move that somewhere else, which means that you and we need to come to an agreement on where that ought to be. There are also some new SIP codes created. And it may be that you've chosen, for lack of a better option, one of those weird 9999 options, like 30.9999, which is always the other category, right? It didn't fit in anywhere else, we're sticking it in there. But now maybe there is a new SIP code that has an exact description. Cybersecurity, that's a good example. Cybersecurity didn't have its own SIP code, not specifically. Now it will. So there is a cybersecurity SIP code, and so cybersecurity programs should move into that SIP code. There's an example.
Is it a STEM code?
I don't know. I don't even know what it is yet. I imagine it's in computer science. I imagine it's an 11 SIP code, if I remember correctly. I don't remember exactly what it is, though. Sorry. So that's part of what we're trying to do now, is to get everything in place so that we can now do this SIP code. And we don't want to be trying to make corrections to your hours and figure all that out while we're also trying to change SIP codes. Please.
I have a question. Is there a reason why instead of a minimum, you cannot display a range?
Yeah, the system isn't set up to reflect a range. Like the best we could do is to list a minimum and a maximum. Okay, and I'm not sure what the possible range is on that minimum and maximum, depending on level, but that's the best we could do. So that's something we've talked about, and if this committee decides it would like to have a discussion on that and give us some recommendations, you certainly could. But there are drawbacks to that too. Communicating clearly that these are minimum and maximums, that where most people are going to fall in that range. If it's a really big range, then it won't be particularly helpful. This degree will require between 30 and 65 hours. Wow, okay. Well, I'm not sure if that was helpful at all. You see what I mean? So there's some pros and cons to that. But I'm certainly happy to have that discussion. If we can do better, I'm all ears. Other questions?
Yeah,
Claire?
so James, when we did this, we were a little confused with the definition of start date.
Okay.
So is it the date that the program was approved by the coordinating board, or is it the date that the program actually started? And we were not consistent in ours, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. No, this is board approval date. This is basically, when did you get a degree authority? Not when did you start admitting students.
Degree authority from you, not from SACS, because that comes later.
Yes. So when did you get degree authority from the state of Texas, from the coordinating board, not from any other entity, not when did you start enrolling students or have your first graduate or anything like that, which is relevant for other things. If you work with me on the annual progress reports for your annual doctoral programs, the system automatically assigns a 1-year due date after the board approval. But so often you guys don't have any students enrolled by that date, and I don't want you to report something that isn't meaningful. So in that case, we update things. But for this system is just concerned with when did the board approve it. However, there is also a little thing you may notice, in that many of them have a approval of a start date that's like 1900 or 1901 or some strange date far in the past. And that's basically the system's default for your program existed before the coordinating board existed, so we don't have a record of when your program started. Because your program probably started in 1930, and this agency didn't even exist until 1965. So many of you older institutions with big catalogs that have been around since the late 1800s or the early 1900s, you have a bunch of programs with start dates of like 1900. That doesn't mean it necessarily literally started then, it just means it started before our record keeping began. Yeah. Sarah?
Can you comment on, in this example you have up on the screen, under what circumstances would we have two listings with two different SCHs versus the other rule you gave us, which was just list the lowest, the least, the minimum number?
So this, this is a display error. What I've just noticed, the trend I've noticed just in like the past week is that the system is sometimes double counting the master's degrees, and I'm not sure why it's doing that, but these actually ought to be two different degree designations. And I've seen some specific examples from institutions where they say, hey, we don't have two MAGR, that's one MAGR and one MS, and you're not displaying them correctly. Sorry about that. That's why I gave you the caveat when I first pulled this up. Hey, there are still some errors in here, and we're trying to fix them. So yeah, that's an excellent question, because yes, that would be a problem if we had multiple degrees in the same zip code with the same designation but different hours. We would have no way to track that. Yeah, that would be a big problem.
Can you pull up, so there's two views on this page that institutions can pull up. This first one I pulled up was by CIP code, and so it's just listing them by 1, 2, 3. The other view you can pull up by administrative structure.
Institutional administrative structure, and I think this one has fewer or perhaps even no problems like the other one did. So let's pull that up and see if we can get it to display.
So this one, I know from working with institutions, is helpful if you're going back to a college or department to see what is the portfolio within that college or school. And then the CIP one is, especially if there are degree programs that could be classified in different areas, or even just to see if that CIP is already occupied, that would be a useful tool for those type of questions.
Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, so let me boost this up a little bit so we can see it bigger. There we go. See, now I was right. It's an MAGR and an MS. They're in the same SIP, but they have different designations. They're clearly different degrees. They're not two copies of the same degree with different hour requirements, which would just be a mess. So yes. For right now, if you want to pull up an accurate representation of your inventory, please use the administrative structure option. For some reason, there's an error creeping in when we just do the more general one by zip code. And we already have IT working on it. It's just going to take them a while to sort it out.
And it can also be downloaded as a PDF or Excel if you want to then sort or do other analysis or tables for other purposes as well. And so, again, we'll include this in our post-meeting email with the direct link, and then also how to get there from our homepage in case you want to navigate through our website.
Yeah, and the other takeaway I just want to remind you, is kind of an aside, but it's an important deal, which is you're going to be getting a memo from us here within probably a month or so, talking to you about SIP 2020 and the changes that are come as a result of that, and probably eventually getting to you a spreadsheet of your programs and the SIP codes that are going to need to change, and or the new options that you have for SIP codes. You know, like I say, cybersecurity. Hey, do you want to move your cybersecurity program into the cybersecurity SIP code? Probably be a good idea. So that'll be coming along, I hope, in about a month. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
So when you do your new certificates, you also have to pick a zip code too, right?
The certificate programs should always be the certificate of the degree program they're attached to.
But for the ones that are standalone,
close by.
What's that? You know how you can have some standalone ones that, and you have the ones that are associated with degrees. So
That's
for the
true.
standalone ones,
yeah, the ones that you don't require our approval or notification, i.e., graduate certificates, 15 hours or less, undergraduate certificates, 20 hours or less. Yeah, those you can designate the SIP codes as you see fit, because they're your own institutional certificates. For the ones that you bring to us, we're always going to expect them to have a program connected to them, and so the certificate should have the same SIP as the program. At least at the, maybe not exactly at the 6-digit level, but certainly at the 4-digit level. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess I will entertain a motion to do lunch. We still have 2 left, so yeah, so we can. Okay, second. Okay, all those in favor of taking a lunch break for, what do you all think? 30 minutes, 40? 30 minutes? Sounds good? Okay, all those in favor then taking a 30-minute lunch break? Say aye. Okay. All right, so for our colleagues on the phone, it's 11:37, and so we will reconvene at 12:07-ish. Ish.
Fly down here? Or did you drive? Yeah, me too, yeah. I'm on the 3:30 return flight, I think.
6 o'clock.
Oh.
And either way, it seems like this is going very fast.
Yeah. This isn't my first rodeo with these meetings. That's why I was on the 3:30.
I'll learn that next time. We're going to be talking forever. It's going to go on and on.
Sometimes they are, but this one, looking through the meat.
Answer my emails.
Protected time, you have protected time.
That's what my extra time is.
I'm knocking off 3 or 4 letters of recommendation.
I think I'm easier to write.
Started one for a promotion letter for someone, a professor, and I find where I saved it. I'm looking, I found, oh, I just did his post-tenure review letter a year ago. What am I doing? Just change it to...
That helps.
Don't say...
Yeah, I do. I do the same thing.
Post-tenure review turned out to have some utility. Had to do my own packet recently, and no matter how far along you are, you just feel like you have to dot every I, cross every T, and it was 2 days of, updating the CV. There was a new format for the CV. I had to go back to all of my old stuff and read.
Lucky you.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's cooperation, starting back 12:10. And so we will move on then to agenda item number 9, which is, I guess, a discussion of institutional approaches to setting tuition and fees for online programs. And I want to thank Rick, is that, yep, Barry, Stephen F. Austin State University for agreeing to present on their practices.
Okay, I'm glad to talk a little bit about this, though, we don't have the answers. One of the things we like at SFA about having our own Board of Regents, not being part of a system, is the opportunity. What we say is we like the opportunity to be nimble, to be able to avoid layers of bureaucracy when we implement changes, and we try to be innovative. But I have to tell you that we've not really taken full advantage of that opportunity when we deal with online tuition and fees. Now, just like all of our sister state institutions, we adjust tuition and fees with the approval of our Board of Regents. And it was my experience through the whole time I was a dean and provost that our Board of Regents accepted nearly every recommendation we brought that dealt with tuition and fees in general, and certainly tuition fees for online programs. So, it really is up to the administration to come up with some plans that would benefit our online programs, and to this point, the Board of Regents has approved everything we've asked. In general, here's our situation. The Stephen F. Austin charges the same tuition and fees generally for online programs that we charge for face-to-face programs. We charge statutory tuition, designated tuition, graduate tuition differential, and the various penalty tuition charges, you know, for excessive hours for undergraduates and three-peats and all that sort of thing. In addition, we charge all kinds of fees, like we all do. Some are mandatory, some are incidental. And we listed a lot of those a few minutes ago in another discussion: records and registration fee, international education fee, recreational sports fee, student service fee, all of this. And there are certain fees that impact directly our online programs. For example, we attach a distance learning fee of about $33 a semester credit hour for every online, every web-based course. This, of course, has been a significant disincentive to growing our online programs. But to ease this burden, we've taken several steps. First, we established an out-of-state electronic fee. That's what it's called officially. This is a reduced tuition rate designed to make SFA's distance education programs more competitive nationwide. The rate is available for students who are enrolled in web-based programs at SFA and who are classified as non-resident and who are currently living out of state. And this current rate is, I think it's still set at $120 a credit hour, which is about a 50% reduction compared to our regular designated tuition rates. Since roughly half of our online master's programs are, and a number of our certificate programs are marketable nationally, this is a great help. And in addition, students who enroll in online courses only in a given semester are not charged certain use-specific fees. And we listed, again, some of those in our previous discussion, things like recreational sports fee and student center fee and things like that. This distance education learning fee was arrived at, I'm not quite sure how, to tell you the truth, but it was an initiative put forward by our office that coordinates distance learning. And it was worked through the whole system through my office as provost, and then we worked with our friends in the finance office. Now, in an attempt to compete with many of you, our sister institutions, in attracting students to specific programs, SFA has developed significantly reduced charges for selected programs, resulting in master's programs, a 30-hour master's program, for just over $7,300, and an 18-hour certificate program for just under $4,400. Now, these rates were set as what was considered sort of market rates that would be competitive with the programs that we found ourselves recruiting up against. Now, interestingly, this was not accomplished by adjusting tuition and fees. Instead, our finance people insisted that it would be a much better approach if we left tuition and fees set where they are, but then simply provide sufficient financial aid, scholarships, to allow all the students in these programs to pay these rates. Why they chose this route, I think probably they didn't want to go to our Board of Regents and say, you need to reduce our tuition for these programs. Instead, they went to the Board of Regents and said, you need to increase our scholarship dollars, and did it on that end. And in any case, the bottom line is that we've had some success in resetting the effective fees that we charge to certain students. In other words, SFA is very conservative in terms of using our so-called nimbleness in setting tuition and fees for online programs in ways that could enhance our enrollment growth. We found ways to sort of work our own system, but up to date, we have not been terribly systematic in our approach. I think this is going to change in our future because we're going to embark on something that many of you have done already. Our administration has announced plans to develop and implement some differential tuition rates based on programs. This should enable us to set tuition rate by specific programs and thus simplifying this process of tailoring to specific needs. Now, for reasons that all of us know very, very well, and particularly because of our physical location, it's really important for us to continue to develop our online programs and to promote them appropriately. I believe that our current administration, led by a new president, will enable us to do so. And I'd be interested in hearing similar sorts of comments from others in the room. Thank you.
Richard, I think I understood at the outset you talked about how this basically discounted rate, which was made up for by financial aid or whatever, was for those students who are definitely classified as being distance students, is their primary classification.
The particular programs they're enrolling in are only offered as online programs.
So what about the student who doesn't want to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and he wants to take an online class? You know, do you have a different tuition structure for them?
No.
They pay the discounted
just
rate.
to take freshman English instead?
Right.
No, the discount that I mentioned is only for specific master's programs.
Okay.
Or certificate programs. But it wouldn't be the freshman that doesn't want to get up at 8 and take you to go to English class.
Is the discount only for out-of-state students, or is it for all students?
It's for all students.
Okay. And has it increased your enrollment?
Yes. Well, yes, it has. It has.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that, like how much?
Well, I was afraid you'd ask me that, and since I'm no longer an administrator, I don't have to know those numbers. I should have found that out, but I don't know. I can try to get those and give them to Jennifer, and maybe she could distribute those in the specific programs. And I really haven't looked at them in the last 2 to 3 years, because that really has been way outside of my area of responsibility.
Have you been able to actually accurately estimate the cost of these programs? I think a lot of us who get into the online education or try to create an online course find out it's a lot of work, and everybody doesn't budget correctly for the amount of effort involved.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion. There was, especially during my time in the provost's office, I was aware of a great deal of discussion about how much was this really costing us, what did we really get from it. And I think the consensus for these particular programs that we repriced or we subsidized with financial aid is that it was worth the investment. There were some other things we tried to do before that were not worth the investment. And so this wasn't a situation where we just pulled some numbers out of the air and said, let's see how high we can get our enrollment. But they actually did some pretty good work seeing what was something that would sell, so to speak, and yet would still enable us to pay our bills.
I had a question. You were talking about toward the end, differential tuition. And so are you planning on charging that instead of the 3 other categories of tuition that you mentioned before?
No, I suspect what they will do, again, I'm not on the inside of planning of this, but I suspect what they'll do is adjust the designated tuition according to either the program that one is enrolled in, or the courses they take, or the college they're enrolled in. I don't know how it will roll out, but it's supposed to roll out within the next year, so they better be working on it pretty hard. They're doing quite a number of things that we tried to do some years ago, and maybe the error of their ways has finally been revealed. But we're going to do away with course fees. We're one of those universities that still charges course fees, which is kind of shaky ground anyway, and we've known that. And so it's something that many of us really pushed for some time, and my understanding is that's going to be part of all of these adjustments that they're going to make, including differential tuition, that will help us get rid of course fees as well.
I guess just a comment on online course fees. So we have one that's currently, I think, $65 per credit hour, so about twice as much as yours. And we're in the process of looking at it and reestablishing something probably will be different, because we're finding that the technology that used to be all for online, we're now using in our residential programs. And so there's becoming more of this overlap between, you know, the flipped classroom and using videos in our residential. And so we're most likely going to go to a lower online fee, but then maybe an instructional technology fee for our residential students, so.
We have had, in the past, a fee called the technology fee, just generally for students, and it was a per semester credit hour fee. I noticed when I was preparing to talk about this today, I just thought I ought to look back over our fee structure and see if something sneaked in that I hadn't been aware of. They now have a thing called university services fee, which rolled in what we used to call library fee, technology fee, all of those sorts of things. I think one of the reasons, this certainly wouldn't cover the expense, but one of the reasons for charging a distance education fee for web-based instruction is that we compensate teachers who do web-based courses on a certain scale. Now, the $33 a semester credit hour probably doesn't cover all of that, but I know that that would be one of the reasons why our finance people would want to keep some sort of fee in place, is to assist in covering that expense. I don't know, does everybody compensate web-based instruction over and above regular faculty load?
We do in our Masters in Public Health, but it's only a small incentive for teaching an online course. And then actually there's another incentive for developing an online course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have both.
Yeah, we have incentives, and also the training is paid for so that the faculty member or the unit doesn't have to pay, but it's centrally paid.
Yeah, we do the training for free, but we compensate for development and delivery. And one other question I wanted to ask, how many still have what we call course fees? In other words, the fee attached to a certain course to cover stuff for that course?
We do.
I know when we went to differential tuition, that's what the goal was, is to eliminate course fees. The problem, of course, is it's based upon the course you enroll in and not the major you are. And so we still have problems with making sure chemistry labs are funded and so on.
Yeah, my department chair, director of the School of Music, he's scared to death because we depend enormously on course fees for equipment, just for a lot of things that a music school has. And he said, it's great in theory, but he said, I want to see what happens that first year before. He's just scared to death he's not going to get the equivalent of what the course fees brought in. So I know it's off topic. I'm sorry for that.
So on our campus, for out-of-state students who are entirely online, we charge the regular out-of-state tuition. And I mean, they don't pay certain fees similar to yours, but we do charge an out-of-state tuition, and then there is a fee for online courses. So that has really hampered our ability to recruit a lot of students from out of state to our online programs. I'm kind of interested in hearing of others who either have created a flat tuition for out of state or other form of, I mean, how many of you charge online students who are out of state tuition? Few. Nobody?
So this is what they sent me. This is what that people told me. Online tuition and fees are based upon residency. In-state pays regular tuition and 7 mandatory fees, which I listed earlier. With out-of-state residents, it is the out-of-state tuition fee rate applied to a specific program. At this point, less than 1.5 of our students are international students. That said, we're going to grow that. We have a $35 an hour distance education fee for online courses, regardless of the student's location. And that is capped at 9 hours for a total of $315. So students in Texas, while taking online courses, pay the same tuition rates as they would pay for on-campus courses based on their resident or non-resident status. Students located outside of Texas pay a fee in lieu of tuition that is determined by each academic department for courses at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. And so that's the differential tuition for those specific courses. Then they waive the fees for those students that are not on campus.
Anything else anyone else want to contribute? I think this is becoming an interesting topic because also I think there are markets out there for low cost online that are also, I think, maybe not necessarily then tied to our traditional way that we've determined what things should cost, and those are in some cases competitors. And so I think it's definitely causing some of our programs to have to rethink their models.
And those outside programs, some of them have huge enrollment numbers, and some of the online MBA programs, for instance, et cetera. And although the institution, there are some really high-ranking institutions that are doing that. They're setting their costs so low and making up the cost with a large number of students who are in there that while our tuition otherwise is quite competitive, suddenly you can get a degree from a really high-ranking R1 institution elsewhere that really has a lot of name and brand recognition for about the same cost as a degree from our institution, and not surprisingly, that's what students then do. So it's a huge recruiting, marketing type of issue.
So then I think our next topic is updates then from the coordinating board.
All right, I'll go ahead and lead off. So I wanted to take a little time to talk to you about graduate program review. Specifically, I'm going to talk here in a little bit about the distance education component. But I thought it was worthwhile, since we're now approaching the end of our first review cycle, just to talk about this transition. So a lot of you I'm already working with, or working with your designees to close out this current cycle. So the first cycle of graduate program review, officially ran from 2013 through August 31st, 2019. That cycle is now done, but some of you still have a few program reviews to turn in, and a lot of you have. You've gotten the last of those done. If there are any outstanding reviews still, please go ahead and get them in before the end of the month. And I want to stress that date, because that is not just an administrative closure date. My IT staff are actually shutting down Cycle 1 as of the end of November, and you won't be technically possible to submit any further reviews for this current cycle after that date. So be sure that you get in everything that you need to get in, and if you need to talk to me about it and we need to adjust anything, let me know. So for now, I think we've got most institutions already sorted out. I've looked through schedules, and a lot of you have already finished all of your submissions. For those of you that don't, if you're facing any severe technical problems, let me know. We'll see what accommodations we can come to. So now, having closed out, or in the process of closing out the current cycle, now at the same time we're also trying to set up for the new cycle. One significant change for this new 10-year cycle is that it's a 10-year cycle of program review and no longer a 7-year cycle. Why 10? Well, 10 is the minimum prescribed by statute, so we're just basically expanding to what the minimum of what statute prescribes. Education Code 61.0512 requires that the board review degrees at least once every 10 years. So what we're doing, asking you to do, is to conduct your external review and then report that to us, and that satisfies statute. So once every 10 years, that suggests that no more than about 15% of your program should be scheduled in any given year, so that it's not too much weighted in one area. As before, you can conduct your master's and doctoral programs in the same discipline. You can conduct those reviews simultaneously. If you have a number of related programs in the same school or college, you can conduct those as one big review as well. That's all allowable. You can conduct your accreditation or licensure type visits, for discipline-specific ones, I mean, not, of course, SACs, which is general, but, your nursing or your business programs or your engineering program. Well, I guess engineering, it doesn't do that at the graduate level, does it? But for those that do have accreditation at the graduate level, you are welcome to use those. Now, one thing I want to make clear that not everyone got clear is that the 3 pieces of each review, the 3 types of materials required, are the same, even if it's accreditation review. So you have to do your self-study, you have to do that external review, which can be accreditation review, but then you still have to respond to that accreditation review. So, for example, some institutions, as their institutional response, would just submit to us the letter from the accrediting board. Oh, look, our accreditation was renewed. Okay, that's good. But what did you do as a result of your accreditation review? What did you improve? What did you change? Because I've noticed, reading through a bunch of these now, and I've read through a great many of them, is that even almost all of them do more than just say, you got accreditation, or you didn't, or you're on probation. They almost always give you some kind of qualitative feedback, even if it's just, hey, here's something we noticed. So, as always, the overall goal of this, of course, is not just to satisfy statute, but to engage in continuous improvement. And you get feedback, someone says, hey, look at this issue, look at that issue, and you think about it and you give it your best response. That doesn't mean you always do exactly what they tell you, because sometimes what they tell you or recommend to you requires a great deal of resources that you don't have at the moment. But you engage in it in a substantive way. Hey, we'll do this other thing that won't cost as much money, and yeah, it's not quite what they recommended, but it gets at the same issue, it addresses the same problem, it improves the same metric, whatever that may be. So, that's graduate program review as the ongoing system. What we're struggling with right now is scheduling the next set of graduate program reviews. I had planned for this to be going on here during the fall at the same time that you're closing out those reviews from Cycle 1. You could be submitting the old stuff, but you could also be looking at your schedule and setting up the new schedule. And unfortunately, that's just technically a mess, and I want to apologize for that. Unfortunately, it's a little bit beyond my control. I'm working literally on a daily basis with my IT staff to try to resolve it, but for some reason, your schedules are not populating with the correct programs. I'm sure any of you that have checked in, you've noticed, hey, I've only got about a third or half of my graduate programs here. What gives? Well, for some reason, it's just not populating correctly. So one thing I want to ask you to do, if you haven't done already, is please just go and look. Just go into the system, look at your new schedule, and see what's there. Some of you have already given me feedback. Thank you so much. That's very helpful for the IT people. They can't fix the problem very effectively if they don't know what it's doing now. And so by telling me what programs don't show up, you're giving me feedback that helps them. So if you've already given me that feedback, you don't have to do it again. But if you haven't gone, at least go and look and see what's there. I am told by the IT staff that the application will not even try to populate your schedule with the programs if you don't go in there and look. So it's like a Schrodinger's cat situation. Just by going and observing, you're changing the outcome. So do go in there and look and see what programs are there. That will at least give it its initial population of programs. It probably won't be all of them, but we're going to fix the system so they all get in there. Once they do, then you go into the system and you just assign a review date to each program. And you hit submit once you've got them all populated. Now, I want to stress that you can't submit until you've got a review date for each program on your list. However, it may be the case that, the ones at the far end of the scale, the ones you're reviewing, some of the ones you're reviewing in 2028, you're not quite sure exactly, that may vary by a year or two, and that's fine. Once these schedules are set, they're meant to be a working document that you and I both work off of, but is not immutable and set in stone. As you know, if you have good reasons, a department chair leaves, or there's been some kind of change in accrediting body requirements, or anything of that nature that leads you to say, hey, there's a very good reason not to review this program at its set time. We need to change that. You just let me know and we work it out. That happens all the time. I hope to have these technical problems in GPR solved by the end of this month. But again, it's beyond my control, and I frankly can't guarantee that. So we'll just keep working on the scheduling issue until it's solved. And if we, I hope we're not still trying to work on schedules in January or February of this year. But if we have to, we will. We'll keep at it until the problem is solved. So now I want to move on to the specific issue that we're talking about here. So other than changing from a 7-year to a 10-year cycle, I haven't recommended any other changes to this system except one. So you may recall that in 2016, the board commissioned the RAND Corporation to do a study of graduate education in Texas, and we got a nice report. We got some really great recommendations out of that, some of which made it into our draft strategic plan. One of those important recommendations was, hey, you folks really need to do more to review the online component of your graduate programs. Now, in particular, that was focused on the master's programs. But there's no reason not to apply that to the doctoral programs as well. So one rule change that I'm going to be recommending to the board that will go, I hope, to the March cause and April board cycle will be intended to set up on the review of online graduate programs for the next 10-year cycle. So please, even though this rule change isn't in place yet, I would encourage you to go ahead and put this into your planning, which is, and it's just a simple one-line change. In the rules, we list all the criteria for the review of master's programs, and then we list all the criteria for the rules of criteria for the review of doctoral programs. And in each of those, I'm just going to put in a single line, which is, programs with an online component shall assess themselves in accordance with the principles of good practice. If you're not already, I know a lot of you already know that document, but the principles of good practice for online programs comes out of the Learning Technology Advisory Committee. And it essentially is their statement of what high-quality online programs should be doing, or what qualities they should have. It's a document that's been around a long time, and it just recently got updated and revised by the LTAC. So, if applicable, if you have a master's program or a doctoral program that has an online component, or maybe it's fully online, just work in an assessment of, does it adhere to the principles of good practice, and you'll be in compliance with this rule change. Again, I plan to take this to March cause and April board, so that means I'll be hoping to get it posted in the Texas Register sometime in January or February, would be my best guess at this point. Are there any questions about that? Okay, then Jennifer, anticipation of our next item? Does anyone have any questions about graduate program review, just generally, whether or not it's the online part or not? Okay, good. I was hoping I could just kind of lay out where we are with graduate program review, and that would help everyone get situated.
So is it starting in the spring,
Yes, so you're scheduling your reviews. Some of you may have reviews taking place this spring, and you may be reporting the results by the end of the summer or early fall. That's, yeah, and that's fine. So we had a number of legislation that we had to take action on, and a number of reports we're going to have to do. One of the significant ones that has a relatively quick turnaround time and a short deadline is this requirement from Senate Bill 64, which is a cybersecurity report. And as you can see here, basically what it does is it requires our agency to collaborate with the Department of Information Resources and to consult with you institutions about strategies to increase the number of cybersecurity programs in the state. We have a report due on September 1st, 2020 to the usual legislative and governor's office, legislative recipients, right, the Light Gov, the Speaker of the House, and the legislative higher ed committees. And this report requires us to basically figure out what can we do as a state to increase the number of programs. So to my mind, there's kind of two components to this. Which is, one is to ask the institutions that have these programs, hey, what led you to want to develop this program? Who's your market? Who are you marketing this to? And what made it harder or easier for you to develop the program? And then on the other side of it is, we ask the institutions that don't have the programs. So why, is there a reason you don't? Would there be something that the state could do to make it easier for you? Or is there something that would lead you to want to develop a program in cybersecurity? We'll be creating a survey to send out, and for you folks that get it in grad schools or you folks that work in the provost's office, please be ready to kick the survey down to your computer science, information resources type departments so that the people that work in these areas can give us some pretty specific responses about what incentivizes institutions to develop these programs. We'll probably have at least one face-to-face meeting in addition to the survey. And again, we'll be looking for you folks to send some people who can speak to the program development at your institution. And out of the information we get from DIR and out of the information we get from your discussions and your survey responses, we'll develop a report that basically, I hope, makes some recommendations to the legislature about what kind of things they could do to incentivize cybersecurity programs and program development here in the state.
So are you also going to be interested in credentials, so certificates? Will that be a part of the data collection?
Yes, I believe the bill does not restrict itself to degree programs, but certificate programs are included as well, because there's a consideration for the 2-year as well as the 4-year institutions in this. Okay, so again, the takeaway here is I'd like for you to just be on the lookout for a memo coming out from us, a survey coming out from us. The memo would be announcing the meetings and or the survey, and the survey, once it's sent out, would be going out electronically and asking you to sort of distribute it to the correct recipient in your computer science department to fill out. Thank you.
Next item is discussion of the graduate students with children, doctoral stipends, benefits, students with disabilities, services for students, employees, so graduate assistants and adult learners, delivery mode, first generation, age-related adult learners could also, maybe be similar, experience, background, support for students to be, successful, diversity of graduate student population. And then one of the topics we've kind of keep coming up is about a legislative recommendation from GEAC related to full waivers for domestic graduate students. And then the last one is Apply Texas and the graduate application. Perhaps you can, voice what of those or others you feel are some topics we should discuss this year.
Back to the top of the list.
Okay.
I like to talk about health insurance for students. That's always a big topic on my campus.
I'd like to address the issue of the relevance of graduate programs in the new market, because a lot of technology changes are happening, AI, machine intelligence at the very least. And there have a lot of literature for the past about a year and a half, about 5 to 6 years on relevance of the grad programs to start with PhD especially. What does a PhD mean and where those students are going basically. I think it's important for us to address those issues instead of just looking at silos issues we have been addressing so far. It's kind of interesting to look at long term as to where is education going, what does education mean, for example, And so that, I think, will be a very important issue for us to discuss at some point. So we won't be left behind. I can share some of the literature I collected for now last about 5 years or so from England, and like short papers on really questioning what are we doing with the grad programs to start with. So.
Okay.
Can this list also be emailed to us so we can consult back on our campuses and respond in that way?
Yes, so we'll include it in the summary notes draft, but I can include it in the email sent to you all and in the post-meeting survey for travel and time. There's also some open-ended boxes I left in there for topics if you need to think on your way back home and would have a suggested topic for later. I've left those items on there as well, and you can input on future topics.
And also, if you have a suggestion then on the format of how to discuss a particular topic, do you want to see things from different campuses? Do you want to rediscuss in groups, et cetera?
Board information, yeah. Because I guess one of my topics, I thought student with disabilities, I think I sort of see there's some complexities in relation to graduate students, and a lot of times the offices are used to the regular coming up with some type of accommodation for a student in relation to a course and taking a class or whatever, but like, you know, what about the TAs who maybe need accommodations? Or what about accommodations in, you know, actually defense or qualifying exams, and I think even the discussion about how much of accommodation can you make before you've actually sacrificed the rigor of the program. So,
I think graduate student parents, as well as first-generation college students, are especially worthy of attention, particularly if campus daycares, one, exist, or two, are available for graduate students.
I'm not sure if this has been discussed previously, but as NIH rolls out more and more mentor training requirements, I don't know if mentor training is something we want to discuss at some point.
I'd be happy to report on the approach we have taken towards graduate students' mental health. I mentioned this at ATGS, and I'll be happy to report. We have had one semester of it. Be happy to report. It's gone well.
On the mentoring topic, I would be curious to know how many other places, if any, have required mentoring agreements for, and I'm really thinking of, I'll call it individual instruction, so probably more PhD students, but where, and an associated topic, we talked about sexual harassment, but I think we should talk about bullying, which may very well be the root origin of much of the abuse that graduate students feel, and they may feel it's because of their gender. It may be just because the person they're dealing with is a blasted bully. How you write a bullying policy, however, I think is very, very difficult. But the mentoring agreements might be a way of reining in or directing behaviors, perhaps. But, you know, we brought up RA funding. I always think of that as the third rail, but this is absolutely the third rail, inserting ourselves into the individual faculty-student relationship.
okay, anything else? Any announcements or questions that individuals might want to solve? So for the ATGS, what's the host institution for this upcoming year? Does anybody know? So UNT for the 2020? Oh,
20 is
sorry.
Temple. For Pete's sakes.
Anybody know?
Yeah.
Okay, so Commerce. So ATGS is the Texas Graduate Deans meetings, and usually in September. So I know this next year, but I don't know, for me, I'm always thinking of a calendar in my head, so I just thought I would bring that out. Okay, All right, so I had a question. It's on this list as a topic, but it's first just a question. Is it actually about the Apply Texas application? I guess I heard that there was a committee that was working on changing questions or something, and maybe that one of the questions they were talking about was being able to apply to multiple programs. And I was just curious, like, are there graduate deans on the committee? Because to be able to provide input to that group?
Who is still using Apply Texas for grad?
We are changing. We are using it right now, but we're changing. But
Yeah, Karen, this isn't my area, but I have heard about this effort that you're describing. I don't know the particulars of it, but I think you're correct that there is a group working to modify Apply Texas to allow consideration of multiple institutions, and I don't know much more than that. I'll have to find out who's staffing this effort. So let me dig into that, and I'll get back to you.
Oh, I pulled up some of that, so it's through, yeah. So, and I'll post-meeting email, we'll get a lot more information in here. It's a standing advisory committee to the agency, and there are representatives from 2-year and 4-year institutions, so I'll include the roster, but there are folks from Stephen F. Austin on there, Texas A&M International, UT Arlington, Texas Tech, Sam Houston, Texas A&M, UT Austin, among others, and there's a variety of different applications within that whole portfolio, and the group looks at sort of the functionality of it, the different question sets, and because it would impact every institution that's utilizing it, they're soliciting working groups, and they're on their subpage on our website. They have when their next meetings and information will be, and how to get in contact with the staff that are doing that. But that's through Claudette Jenks and College Readiness and Success Division. So we'll get you more of the information, but I know they were talking about the graduate application and wanted to sort of bring perhaps some ideas or some input here. So we can get
so
more
could we get them to come maybe visit us at our next meeting?
But we should maybe ask how many truly are still using Apply Texas, because for our campus, this is way too late. But we've moved on. This was not tenable.
But I do think I saw 4 or 5 hands just raised here who said they were still using it. And then I think there are some others who are still using it who are not here. So even though I guess for me it wouldn't be of interest, I think we definitely would want to allow the opportunity to get some feedback, though, from, I think, the ones that are using it, so that they could at least get the graduate, perspective. Okay, I was trying to wait until we got to 1 o'clock, but it looks like we're not going to make it to that. So I guess then if there's nothing else, I could entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay, second? Okay. All right, all those in favor? All right, thank you all. Safe travels back.
Thank you, everyone.